Thank you, Marcel. And thanks everyone for coming to this session. This session is on modernizing data protection. My name is Ashish Ray. I am the Vice President of Product Management for Oracle Databases Mission Critical Technologies. In this session, I hope to spend some time with you talking about data management trends and also the trends that we are seeing with regards to data protection around this data management. When we look at the data management trends, and in our role, we interact with customers around the world, three trends have kind of emerged. Number one, we have seen a massive growth of data volume. And this is spurred by what we are noticing as the waves of digital transformation across both business and consumer sectors. Number two, what we are also noticing is this new data types for modern workloads, what we refer to as converged data management, beyond relational. It could be columnar, JSON, AI, ML, in-memory, embedded data models around graph, spatial, blockchain, so on and so forth. And finally, we are noticing high transaction velocities. And these are required so that business entities around the world can take instantaneous business decisions. What used to be I/O latencies around milliseconds, now the demands are around low microseconds. With this data management trend has come up increased data management complexity, and that in turn leads to increased cybersecurity threats. When we are looking at this complex data management trends, increased cybersecurity threats, this means collectively, this requires new ways to protect your data. And why that is important? Because data at the end of the day is the lifeblood of your business. So you need new ways to look at data protection, and that's what this session is about. Let's look into some stats. Specifically, let's look into ransomware, which is one of the most dangerous cybersecurity threats that exist today. When we have looked at recent reports, say for example from FBI in the US has outlined over 4,000 attacks related to ransomware that happens on a daily basis. Other cybersecurity research have also outlined various other impact that could be related to downtime. In this case, they have outlined 19-day average downtime. It could be related to total costs. For example, total cost of remediating ransomware is around $1.85 million US dollars. And collectively, US organizations have lost more than 7.5 billion in the last count in 2019. So you see what's happening related to cybersecurity and ransomware. It is getting complex, it is getting sophisticated, and the impact is getting more and more dangerous. So we have to do something about this. But before we look into the data protection trends, let's take a step back and find out what ransomware really is. Citing references from the US CISA agency, that is the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, the way they define ransomware, it's a piece of malicious software code inserted into your system by cyber criminals. And the idea is this malicious software code encrypts your data such that you no longer have access to your data. And they will hold you hostage to this data till you're able to provide some ransom, often in the nature of cryptocurrency. And they will put pressure on you so that they can extract this ransom. Otherwise, they will threaten you that they will release your private, confidential, sensitive business data in public domain. The CISA agency, they have outlined a few best practices around combating ransomware. And these best practices are around technologies and processes. And as you see from the first one, the most pertinent technology is around modern backup and recovery solutions. What we really need is an ultra robust backup strategy to combat cybersecurity threats. And why that is needed is because traditional backup and recovery technologies may not be sufficient to take on this threat. What do we mean by that? From an Oracle database product development organization standpoint, when we have interacted again customers around the world and we have learned through their experiences, our experiences also, a framework of 7 principles have emerged. Let's look into them one by one. The first essential element is data encryption, validation, verification, and protection. All of these are essential elements of data security, but they have to work together with zero data loss. So that's number one. Number two, when you are looking at your backup and recovery system, that itself has to be completely robust, fault tolerant. That's what we mean by hardened backup infrastructure components. Number three, you have to create what's called a air gap. That means they have to be fault isolated and threat isolated from the production system. If something were to happen to the production system, the same breaches could not impact or may not impact the backup and recovery systems. And on top of that, if you archive off to cloud, you get an additional air gap because now you can leverage the security framework of the cloud vendor. Number four, the access controls with distinct administrative privileges. The same person who is creating your data, who is creating your table spaces, that administrative person, that administrative group should be different from the group which does the backup policies or which does create the actual backup and recovery techniques and the operations. So that's what we mean by distinct administrative privileges. We talked about policies. So the policies should be fine-grained and flexible such that you are no longer dealing with an overall backup, but you're looking at your data, maybe tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 data and creating policies around them. So fine-grained policies. Of course, it has to satisfy fast data recovery with no data loss. You're already under time pressure. You're being held hostage. You don't have access to your data. You want to restore your data. You have to do it very fast and again with no data loss. And finally, end-to-end monitoring and reporting of your entire data portfolio. So these are the 7 essential elements that we have identified that is needed for a modern data protection solution. What does Oracle offer in this regard? That's where Zero Data Loss Recovery Appliance comes in. In this forum, you will have separate technical sessions which will go deeper into the architecture, but essentially this is the architecture that is being deployed in our worldwide enterprise customer base when they're looking at new ways to do data protection. This architecture is essentially all Oracle database optimized, and because it is ingrained not only with Oracle backup and recovery technologies but also with Oracle block structure, it can offer zero data loss with the additional privileges and the additional benefits such as completely scalable, available architecture, complete flexibility around the administrative privileges, end-to-end monitoring with support around archival to cloud in the backend. This architecture then now I have presented to you, and the question that may come up is, okay, what does this mean with the framework that we have established previously? Number one, with regards to encryption, sure, you can encrypt your production data set using Oracle advanced security tools and techniques and capabilities such as transparent data encryption. That's number one. Number two, I mentioned that it is integrated in a block level. So essentially you can configure a recovery appliance such that from an Oracle database standpoint, you can send redo blocks to the recovery appliance in a real-time manner. real-time transaction protection. This recovery appliance is based on Engineered Systems hardware, so completely scalable, highly available, reliable, performant, and highly secured. Compute and storage architecture which can be scaled out on an as-needed basis as your data volume grows, and completely fault-tolerant as well. With regards to fault-tolerant, you can create air-gap replication backups. So for example, you can have an upstream recovery appliance and a downstream recovery appliance. You can set up replication between them, and with policies such that they can go through a network firewall which is strictly monitored by you. If something were to happen, you can close off the firewall. That is essentially creating a fault isolation and a threat isolation boundary around the downstream recovery appliance. But the beauty of this technique is if you re-enable the firewall, we have the intelligence to pick up where the replication stopped. So you have several facilities around creating this air gap around the downstream or the replicated recovery appliance. Talking about air gaps, sure, you can archive off to tape or our ZFS appliance, or even to Oracle Cloud infrastructure using Oracle Cloud Storage, thereby creating an additional layer of air gap related protection. We offer built-in backup automation, such as the administrator who can come in, he or she can be designated as the recovery appliance administrator and then would be responsible for creating the backup policies or the backup techniques and the best practices around your organization for data protection. Fundamentally, a different set of organizations, different set of teams from the database administrator. So thereby you create very clearly labeled policies and clear, strict controls and administrative privileges around these multiple data management related groups. Of course, you can do a point-in-time recovery at any point at any SCN, and you can do it with zero data loss and extremely fast, taking advantage of the underlying highly scalable, available, and performant architecture. And finally, when you're looking at your data portfolio, you are not looking at your data in isolation. You're not just looking at your production data or your backup data. You're looking at your entire data set. And Recovery Appliance enables an end-to-end data validation, data integrity checks, monitoring, and compliance reporting. Imagine you are under time pressure. You have restored your data and I found out that the data was corrupted to begin with. And then you will not be able to deploy production databases on top of the data, right? So essentially, you're still under downtime. Recovery Appliance continually does data in the background, data validation and data integrity checks. If for any reason, any block does not satisfy the data integrity check, you are immediately alerted. So net, it is really the best database optimized protection from ransomware and other cybersecurity threats. And this is what is being deployed by our enterprise customers worldwide. So let's summarize. What we have seen is because of the complex nature of data management, there are increased cybersecurity threats and the impact can be devastating. Material impact both on revenue and trust. So that's given. So with these problems, you need a set of modern data protection techniques. These techniques go beyond traditional backup and recovery. They look at data security, data integrity, and data availability in a holistic manner. And that's where Zero Data Loss Recovery Appliance comes in. In essence, it's the world's best Oracle database protection. Zero data loss, data validation, fast restore, end-to-end monitoring, and many more as we have seen. Essentially, this is all possible because of its deep automated integration with Oracle database. Thank you for spending some time with me here. Hope you can apply some of these best practices into your data protection methodologies and your tool sets. For further information, please visit oracle.com/ZDLRA. Thank you.